Hello and welcome to another episode of Guess That Record. I am your host, Jackson Reed. This is the show where we talk about music and try to figure out which album I pulled from my collection. Thanks again for tuning into another episode. Your support is always appreciated. We have a great guest today. She's currently the director of A&R for BMG, where she's responsible for signing acts to the company's publishing division. I'm super excited to be speaking today with Claire Bernardin. How are you doing, Claire?
Doing well, thanks. How are you, Jackson?
I'm good. So where are we talking to you from today?
I am based out of Los Angeles. I'm here right now.
Awesome. I love LA. Are you from there originally?
Yes, born and raised in the San Gabriel Valley of Los Angeles. So I've lived here most of my life.
Sweet. Nice. Yeah, it's great to be speaking with you today. I'm excited to learn more about your career and, what it's like to work for such an influential company like BMG.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I always love to start out the interviews by asking, what was the first song or the first album that got you interested in music?
That's a really hard question to answer. I don't know. I've been a fan of music for longer than I can remember. My mom has always had a really extensive music library, and some of my first memories of music are sitting in the backseat of her car as a small child, 3, 4, 5, because back then most cars or a lot of them had CD changers. You didn't have streaming or HD radio, so she would cycle through different CDs, whether it was Glenn Gould's Goldberg variations or um, Van Morrison, or like she'd make mix CDs, or my sister would make mix CDs for her. And like later in life, I got to start picking some of those CDs. So I remember we had like the Wicked soundtrack for a really long time. So it was just kind of this mix of different styles and genres that got me really interested in music, and um, I guess it just has never left.
Right. And as you got more interested in music, have you like ever been a musician yourself, or did
No.
you always have more interest in like being in the business side of it?
I started out as a musician. I was my first foray into musicianship was as a member of the Los Angeles Children's Chorus, pre Billie Eilish. My sister was a member of the chorus before I was, and those were the first concerts I ever went to. And from there, I was a member there for 4 years, and then I started in on piano lessons, and then I started writing my own music, and then I got into guitar, and I played in ensembles in high school, and ended up going to music school for my undergrad at the University of Miami. And um, it was there that I realized pretty quickly that I was never going to be a musician and wanted to switch to the business side.
Yeah. And now it's sort of interesting, like looking at sort of your career path, because I believe you actually like officially got like your first sort of job in like the recording industry was with BMG. Is that right?
Yeah, I started as an intern 9 years ago,
Hmm.
and from there I've worked with them off and on, and obviously I've been with them for the last 6 years full time. But yeah, it's most of my career has been with BMG.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think like before going a little further into that, it would be great to sort of share with the listeners what BMG does, because they're a very big company with lots of different things going on. So yeah,
Mhm.
what can you tell us about BMG?
BMG is a multinational company. We do publishing, which is the division that I work in, but we also have a label, among other different sort of services based on both of those, sectors within the industry. So we have a really strong sync team. We have a really strong brand partnerships team. We try to be as 360 as we can. I think, in my opinion, I don't know if the board has an official answer to this, but I've sort of seen different levels of the company. I started as an assistant, and now I work as director of A&R. And, I've seen us go through a lot of different just ways of servicing clients.
Hmm. And it's obviously, like, kind of in the business, there will be companies like that are just record labels, or companies that are, just do publishing. So at BMG, is it sort of like intertwined, I guess? Like if you're
Yeah, I mean,
signed, yeah.
yes and no. There are definitely clients who are signed to both sides, but it's not um, mutually exclusive, I would say.
Okay,
Just because you're signed to the publisher doesn't mean you're signed to the label. Just because you're signed to the label doesn't necessarily mean you're signed to the publisher. So it's one of those things where it has to make sense for both sides. I think it has to make sense for the creative, the artist, the producer, the songwriter, and their business, as well as for the larger company.
for sure. Yeah. Now, I guess what makes BMG sort of stand out amongst the competition, you think?
I think we're in a really interesting position as a company because we sit in this sweet spot between like true boutique and major. So we have the infrastructure of a major, but we're closer to the size of a boutique. We're a little bit smaller. I know we have over 1,000 employees at this point, but I don't know how many more. So relatively small. So I think we have this advantage where we kind of get to move similarly to how a boutique moves, but with the muscle of a larger music company.
Hmm. And kind of looking at your story, it seems like a place that really promotes growth, because like you've started as an intern and now, here you are as a director. Is that, does it sort of promote that, you think, that kind of growth?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I know a number of people who have been at the company for 5, 10, 15 years who have seen growth within their own careers, and I've seen even sort of the next generation of executives come in and watched a number of people grow in their careers as well.
Hmm. And it's so kind of like talking about like A&R. Typically the sort of the traditional role of an A&R person is,
Hmm.
you go out and look for talent to bring into the company, and then you also sort of look after who's already signed to
Hmm.
the company. So, you know I guess the one thing I'm kind of curious about is, what's when you're doing it in sort of the publishing aspect, like yourself, how is A&R different, or is it similar to sort of like how A&R is at a label?
I think that there are similar practices, but it's inherently different because you're working with two different copyrights. So on the label side, you're working with the sound recording. On the publishing side, you're working with the composition itself. So what you're looking for is completely different, and how you service creatives who work on both of those sides is completely different. And there is some overlap. You're absolutely correct. Um, for my purposes, I'm looking at the beginning of the process, the creation of the song, how something comes into being. And so I'm looking for and working with creatives who have that songwriter mentality. Whereas I think, and I don't want to, I've never actually worked on the label side for very long. When I did, it was more so on the product and production side. So working basically with the finished product. But it's more so about what you do with that song composition once it becomes a sound recording, and how you get it to the masses, and how you communicate it and make sure that it stays in people's ears for the duration.
Hmm. And I think it would be great to sort of know, like, who are some of your, artists or songwriters that you're overseeing right now, and then what's like, what's kind of your typical day working this job like?
Sure. My roster is a little different. Because I oversee our Latin roster, and then I also work with General Market US. So I don't like to think of it as two separate rosters. I like to think of it as, two halves of a whole. Um, So I work with a number of artists. I work with a number of producers and songwriters, everyone from Ali Stone, Ocho on the Beat. I work with Pitbull, Halsey Lewis Capaldi. Um, it's a really wonderfully diverse roster, and I feel very fortunate to be working with creatives who are this incredibly talented and hardworking. Um, I don't think that there's a standard day in in A&R. I don't think there's like a standard day when you work in music because things can shift so quickly. Um, because there will be a day like I had on Monday where I'm at my desk at 9:30 and I am just absolutely locked in on my computer, and it's emails and spreadsheets and research and all of the above. And then I'll have days like the day I had on Wednesday where I don't think I actually got to my computer until 5 because I was running around basically just in meetings all day. And when you're driving from Encino to Beverly Hills and then to Los Feliz in LA, it's a lot of sitting in the car and rolling calls and listening to demos, which is all part of the job. But it's just a different iteration of how this job gets done. So
Yeah.
it's very nuanced, and there are a number of different ways and different facets to how things get done.
Yeah, for sure. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by Marvel Marketing. Marvel Marketing is an award-winning digital marketing company headquartered in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, working with clients in different industries from all over North America, including Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Marvel Marketing services include website design and development, website maintenance, search engine optimization, public relations services, and social media management, amongst others. To find out more, visit marvelmarketing.ca. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by Guitarworks. One of Canada's top independent music stores for over 30 years, Guitarworks carries a huge selection of musical instruments from the biggest brands in music, including Gibson, Fender, Martin, Yamaha, and Paul Reed Smith. Visit any of their 3 Calgary locations or shop online at guitarworks.ca and join the Guitar Perks program to earn money back with every purchase. Guitarworks, your total guitar store. This episode of Guess That Record is also sponsored by Recordland, home to the largest selection of music in Canada. Buy, sell, and trade tapes, CDs, and vinyl. Located in Calgary's Inglewood neighborhood on 9th Avenue Southeast, visit them in person or on Instagram at Recordland Calgary. And do you say, how much of the job for you is split between, looking for new talent versus, working with the talent you currently have?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends. I don't think that I don't know how to quantify that actually, because I think in the back of my mind I'm always looking, I'm always listening. Somebody asked me this yesterday actually, and I was like, I have no idea. Just given that I love listening to music, I love discovering new music. I will hyperfixate on a song and then be like completely disgusted with the playlist that I've created because I've listened to it 10 times in a row over the course of 12 hours. I need to like basically cleanse my palate and listen to something else, and then I'll go back to that playlist that I'm hyperfixating on. So when I'm listening to something completely different, what I'll look for is something that I've never heard before. I want to hear things that I've never heard before, especially if they're things that push me out of my listening comfort zone. So from that perspective, I think that they are constantly working in conjunction with one another. These two sides of A&R, because even if I'm working with somebody that is on my roster already, they might introduce me to something or someone that I've never heard of, or that I really enjoy listening to, or whose songwriting really knocks me off my feet, knocks it out of the park. And they're both sort of happening simultaneously all of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like when you find something out there that like really catches your attention and you think like there might be potential, what's sort of the process of like bringing someone onto your roster?
Um, it really depends. Sometimes they are very quick and easy deals. Sometimes it takes a year or more. But the steps are sort of the same. It's a lot of getting to know you. It's a lot of making sure that personalities click and that the services that I'm able to offer and the way that I work as an A&R makes sense for the creative and their team. Um, and then we get into the weeds of, okay, these are the splits that you want and these are the terms and this is the advance and we're going to go back and forth on this, and that takes its own timeline as well.
Yeah. Now, what are, like at your time at BMG, what have been some of like your biggest successes, like most noteworthy projects you've had the chance to be involved with?
That's a great question. I don't necessarily like to call things more successful than another because I think everything that we do in music is sort of a success. And I know that sounds like she's pandering and doesn't want to answer that question, but truly, I work with so many different kinds of creatives, and I work with so many different um, producers, songwriters, and artists who work differently and who um, have their own definitions of success. And at the end of the day, it's about them and about them achieving their goals. And so I'm equally proud to be a part of everything that my clients touch. And if I can be more active and be more helpful and provide more value to that process, those are the things that I feel the most proud of, honestly, is being able to say like, hey, we got through this together. Hey, we did that together. Hey, like this is your success. And I'm happy to have been a part of it. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it's about for me, is seeing everybody on my roster succeed and be happy with that success.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't blame you for having an answer like that, because I've often heard, like, famous artists, when people say like, what's the greatest song you ever wrote, and they're like, well, I like all of them. They're,
Mhm.
uh, they're like my kids or whatever. I can't pick a
Yeah,
favorite. So
exactly.
yeah. hmm Now, this was sort of interesting because when I was sort of looking you up and seeing what you've done and everything like that, I noticed that you've been organizing songwriting camps with BMG.
Mhm.
So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things to dive in on. It's my favorite kind of project. Um, Songwriting camps to me are like the bread and butter of the music industry because it's bringing together a community to create. And especially, post COVID and in an age like today where everyone is connected by the internet, it's so exciting to see different kinds of creatives come together in one place and just lock in and work on either a specific project or work towards a specific goal, get out of their comfort zone and work in genres that they don't necessarily work in all the time. So, um, putting together camps is a very exciting aspect of the job, given that it's an opportunity to expand all of my clients' networks and get to see more of the creative process, and see people really get creative and work outside the box.
hmm And like when you're putting one of these together, how do you sort of decide who is invited to attend?
I don't like to make things exclusive by any standard. Usually it just comes down to like max capacity of whatever facility we're using or like bandwidth. I've done camps that include 10 people, and I've done camps that include 45 people. And it really starts with what we're working. What's the end goal? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Who are the best creatives that fit the brief, and how can we best make sure that they are working at their like on all cylinders, but also pushing everybody to kind of get outside of their what they're normally used to working towards. So It's a lot. I usually start with reach out. I will start by, like, putting together, like, a wish list of creatives that I wanna include, but then I'll have other publishers or managers or labels or, contacts, even creators who are participating in the camp be like, "You know who you need to include, or you should consider this. Here's a bio for this person. I think they would be great for X, Y, and Z." And then it's just a matter of making sure that everything makes sense as far as, create how people work in the room together. Does everybody sort of fit that way? But also personalities as well.
Mhm. And I guess, like, kind of a two-part question here. So like the theme of the camp is sort of different each time then? Is it like, oh, we're going to be writing songs this time, or it's going to be production based, or like, do you sort of decide that in advance?
It definitely gets decided in advance. The theme or the goal of the camp is usually decided by the market. Who are the artists that are actively working? What are the projects that we need to be participating on? What are the albums that are open? Who's taking pitch songs? Things like that. So, we've done sync camps in the past where we get to have more control over the briefs that are provided. And, we did one in Miami last year. It was a Spanish language sync camp where we were focused on Latin music specifically for placement in film, TV ads, and games. And that was one where it felt like we had a little bit more of a hand in figuring out exactly what we were working towards, just given we were looking for specific briefs for specific brands that we sort of handpicked. I say we, but really it was our sync team handpicked. And then we went through and invited pretty much all of our roster and then invited some external creatives as well. So those are really fun. I love doing sync camps because it sort of it gives everyone an opportunity to work towards something that is a little different from the usual artist brief.
Yeah. And I guess to follow up on that, is it like, typically if you attend these camps, you have like a good chance of, like whatever you work on catching the eye of someone? Is that sort of the idea of it all?
We always hope so. We absolutely
Hmm.
always hope so. I think there's never a guarantee, unfortunately. And I wish that it were as easy as that, as you write the song and it gets placed and we're done. And then we all make millions of dollars and we have a number one radio hit and everyone lives happily ever after. That's the goal. That's the dream. Unfortunately, that's not usually how it works, but it's about creating IP that is either used for whatever project we've set the camp up for, or being able to pitch that down the road for an artist for a specific opportunity.
And of course, also creating connections with other people as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important part of a writing camp, is that and I don't like to call it networking. It's community building, because a lot of the time you're working with people that you've never worked with before, and I think that can be very nerve wracking, but it's also very exciting.
Hmm. For sure. Now, we're just about to head into the new year here. So what's in store for you in 2025?
Um, I travel a lot, as a lot of my friends and colleagues know. So I think that there'll still be a fair amount of travel in store for 2025. Planning a couple of songwriting camps, which I'm very excited about. Um, Hoping to close some deals on some potential signings, which would be very exciting. And honestly, I say all these things, but I think the most exciting things that are going to come out of 2025, I have no idea about yet. So I'll keep
Hmm.
you posted.
Sounds good. All right, Claire. Well, we are going to be entering into the guessing segment of this podcast
Fantastic.
here. Yeah, so I'll explain the rules here for you and any new listeners we may have. So, in this bag I have right here is a record from my collection, and I'm going to give you 3 clues about this album,
Okay.
and then we'll play a game of 20 questions to try and figure out what the album is. And if you get stuck, I'm very generous with hints. So,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, no worries. Claire Bernardin, are you ready to guess that record?
I am ready.
Awesome. All right, here are your 3 clues. This album was released in the 2010s. It's the final album from this group, and it features a major hit single that reached number 2 on the Billboard charts. Question 1.
Okay. Can you tell me which Billboard chart?
The Hot 100.
Hot 100. Okay.
Question 2.
Pop, alternative, or R&B?
It's kind of a bunch of things, but I would say pop.
Okay, pop.
Question 3.
Is it a US-based artist or an ex-US artist?
They are outside of the US.
Okay.
Question 4.
Let me think. And you said it's a group. Mm-hmm. Is there one standout member of the group that would be more notable than the other members?
I would say they are very much a collective. Like, you don't think of one or the other, you think of everyone. Question 5.
Is it a One Direction?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
Question 6.
Is it a heavy synth record or a heavy guitar record?
It probably leans a little more on the synth side of things, but I'll give you a hint here. But this record was kind of a stylistic change for this group, where they used to be like almost exclusively synth, and then this record introduced more sort of live instruments on it.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. You've stumped me now.
Okay. Well, this was, you mentioned to me that this was one of your favorite artists.
Okay.
Question 7.
There's a long list of those. I'm like trying to think back to the list that I sent you. Is it an M83 record?
Nope. Question 8.
Okay. And it's ex-US. I'm like, I can't even remember the list that I sent you. I feel like that list changes so often.
Okay, I'll give you another hint.
Okay.
This group is a duo.
Daft Punk?
It is a Daft Punk record.
Okay. 2010s, and I'm sure the answer is like completely obvious.
As I said in the clues, it's their final album.
Okay, Random Access Memories.
It was Random Access Memories.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, I've started doing this now when we do the guessing segment. But what can you tell the listeners about Random Access Memories?
I think you hit the nail on the head where you said it was such an interesting stylistic shift, going from such a synth heavy discography and then incorporating so many not just instruments but arrangements, especially with all of the features on that album. It's really an incredible, like, when I think about that album, I think a lot about arrangement, especially like the influences that they have, not just from like the club scene, but also there's so much classical influence on a lot of their arrangement as well. And I think that's really evident when you compare a lot of the different songs on that record, and not just how the instrumentation that they use, but also how it's mixed. Because everything on that album feels so intentional with how they're highlighting different elements and different, even like musical themes and motifs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I'm like, my preferred, music is from like, the 60s, 70s, 80s. Mm-hmm. So I can really appreciate this album because, they kind of made it in that sort of old school way. It feels, like, yeah, they were trying to go for a live sound versus, mm-hmm. going all digital, like their sort of previous work. And, the other interesting thing is that I feel like this is a record that when you look at when it came out in 2013, I feel like this kind of, in a way, it killed that whole loudness war that was going on, because it's mixed in a very old school kind of way where it's, like not really in your face and and everything. Like they kind of let everything breathe, and there's a lot of space in the recording, and it's not just like, let's make this as loud as possible for the heck of it.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's kind of continued on since then. Like
Yeah.
we don't really see records that are mixed in that way that it was in sort of the early 2000s, where it was just like, super, super loud. So, yeah.
Agreed.
And it's, I also enjoy the record, being sort of an old school music fan, because they brought in a lot of people from back in the day on this record, which I
Yeah.
think is awesome, because it shows like these guys can still, these older musicians who have been around for longer can still contribute to something new. You have like Nile Rodgers, who's one of
Yep.
the great rhythm guitar players, and kind of cool. They also, another guy who actually helped write a few songs on this record is Paul Williams.
I
And
know, which is such
I,
a cool shout out, like,
mhm.
I it's I sorry. Thinking about Paul Williams is really interesting because when you think about his career going from Rainbow Connection and he did all the music for the the Muppets Christmas Carol as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then to listen to a lot of his solos records and then to jump to this, his like depth and breadth of musical ability is just insane.
And it's kind of cool because I have an adjacent connection to Paul Williams, actually. So
Really?
on this podcast, probably about 2 years ago now, I interviewed a guy by the name of Floyd Sneed,
Mm.
and Floyd was the drummer for Three Dog Night.
Oh, wow.
And uh, uh, it was, of course, Paul Williams wrote a few hits for Three Dog Night, because they were a band that only used like external songwriters. They didn't write their own stuff, but Paul Williams wrote quite a few songs for them. And I also wanted to mention with Paul Williams, while we're talking about him, because he's also done quite a bit of acting. So
Yes.
he's been in movies like Smokey and the Bandit, and it was also funny because he was in one of the Planet of the Apes movies
That's
back in the
right.
day. And if anyone's interested, you can go on YouTube, because when he was making that movie, he was scheduled to be on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, but he couldn't get out of his ape makeup in time, so he went on Johnny Carson in his full Planet of the Apes outfit, which is it's a funny watch for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna
Um,
have to check that out.
yeah, for sure. Now, what going back to Random Access Memories, what are some of your favorite tracks from this record?
Lose Yourself to Dance, Doing It Right. Doing It Right always, like, finds its way into playlists for me whenever I'm putting stuff together. I actually just added it to a playlist that I made for a business trip that I have coming up tomorrow. 'Cause it feels like one of those universal feel-good songs in a really poignant way. I think those are my 2 favorites.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And for me, it might, like, uh, I think I would have to say, for me, it's probably Get Lucky, which might be a
Yeah.
cliche choice, because
No, not at all.
that was the song that hit number 2 on the charts.
Right.
But the thing that I really like about that song is the fact that it was such a major hit, and again, it is not. It doesn't really have a modern sound to it, right? Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't really. They weren't doing what other hit songs are doing these days on that track, and I think it goes to show that you can do a song that's just guitar, bass, drums, and a little bit of keyboard still, and it can be a hit as long as it checks the boxes of a hit song, which
Yeah,
it obviously does, because it's gets stuck in your head.
it does all the time.
Yeah. And another track I think is great is "Give Life Back to Music," the opening song, which
Yeah,
another, both Get Lucky and that one have Nile Rodgers guitar on it, and
right.
it's that track is it's a great example of sort of like a thematic statement for an album, where it's kind of like, this is what we're going to be doing on this record here.
Mhm. It's a
Hmm.
yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a great, like, opener. It's almost like an intro to kind of sum up. It's like your executive summary of the
Yeah,
album. It's like,
the
this is what we're
thesis.
covering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. All right, Claire. Well, we have reached the end of the interview. I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was great to to learn about your career and what it's like to work with a company like BMG. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure. And is there any place you want to direct the listeners to, like where they can follow you or anything like that? Or
Sure, you can find me on Instagram. I'm a pretty easy search. I think that's the only social media I have right now, actually.
there you go. Perfect. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Guess That Record. Make sure to leave a 5-star review and tell your friends to check us out. I also want to shout out our radio partners currently airing Guess That Record as a syndicated show. CKMS in Kitchener, Ontario, CKXU in Lethbridge, Alberta, and South Devon Sound in Kingsbridge, UK. So if you're in those markets, be sure to check out those stations to hear Guess That Record. If you're with a radio station and you'd be interested in adding Guess That Record to your programming, send us an email at guessthatrecordpodcast@gmail.com. We'd also appreciate it if you'd follow us on Instagram and TikTok, where our username on both platforms is at Guess That Record. And lastly, subscribe to our YouTube channel to see the video versions of these amazing interviews. Remember to keep rocking, and we'll see you on the next episode of Guess That Record.